Very good afternoon, everybody, and happy Thursday. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Sandy Elson, and on behalf of the travel professional community and homebasedtravelagent.com, I want to welcome all of you and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be with us today. We are very happy to welcome ARC as our host. We really appreciate the support we all get from ARC and thank them for that. Our speaker is Doug Nass, Director of Fraud Investigation for ARC. Doug's topic today is Learn How to Spot Fraudsters, and this is something that's really important for all of us, and I know you're going to find this interesting and helpful. Doug Nass is the Manager of Fraud Investigations at the Airlines Reporting Corporation, we know it as ARC, in Arlington, Virginia. He supervises a fraud team that analyzes airline ticketing data from U.S.-based travel agencies to uncover various fraud schemes in the U.S. travel industry. The team focuses on tracking the activity of various fraud rings and serial fraudsters that target U.S. travel agents. Doug also works with law enforcement agencies to get these individuals and groups identified, arrested, and prosecuted. He has worked for the past 20 years as an analyst, trainer, and manager in the Fraud Prevention Department at ARC. ARC powers the U.S.-based travel industry with premier business solutions, travel agency accreditation services, process and financial management tools, and powerful data analytics. In 2014, ARC settled $89.6 billion worth of carrier ticket transactions for more than 9,400 travel agencies with 13,000 points of sale. By providing world-class business services and products, ARC enables participating agencies and 200 carriers to focus on what's important, increasing their revenue. Established in 1984, ARC is headquartered in Arlington, Virginia. Before we get started, please remember that you are all muted, but we welcome your questions. You can type in your questions at any time in the question area on the right-hand panel of your screen. At the end of Doug's presentation, we'll get to as many questions as we can. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Doug so he can get started. Welcome, Doug.
All right. Thank you, Sandy and Joni, for the opportunity to talk today and talk about a really important topic, which is fraud. I know it scares everyone that there's fraudsters out there targeting them, and we're doing a lot here at ARC to drive these guys out of the system, make life difficult for them. So we, as always, appreciate the opportunity to get in front of frontline agents and the ones that are dealing with fraudsters potentially. So thank you very much for the opportunity. One thing I'd like to start out with is sort of the philosophy we have at ARC, and how we look at ARC, how we look at fraud and the things that we're doing. But sort of the philosophy is we want to do what we can to spot the fraud early in order to reduce the exposure for the agents and the airlines to losses. We know we can't stop it. It's not really realistic that we can stop all fraud, but we can do what we can to spot it early. Keep the losses, say, at hypothetically $3,000. No one wants to pay these debit memos. We know that, but it's much better to stop it at $3,000 rather than allow it to escalate to $30,000, $130,000, $230,000. And we do see some of these fraud schemes, they get that high in a very short amount of time. Especially if you think about a lot of the fraudsters are operating internationally. They are operating, out of places in West Africa and South and Central America, targeting you guys, targeting the U.S. travel industry in order to, pose as potential legit customers and obtaining, those tickets. And of course, so many of them are very expensive, and a lot of the tickets for these customers, they're going to start out at $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 per ticket. So you can see how it can quickly escalate into a serious problem in a very short amount of time. But at the end of the day, we want to make it difficult for the fraudsters to operate in our system. We do things like we monitor high-risk airports. and contact agencies when we think we spot some suspicious ticketing, things that are just outside the norm. We'll pick up the phone and reach out to the issuing agency to start asking questions. Can you tell me about that customer who ordered these tickets out of, say, Lima, Peru to Madrid for immediate departure? It's just sometimes, a lot of agencies, they do on a normal basis, but um, we love to contact the agencies to find out more information. We like to also work with law enforcement and get these passengers stopped. If we can't get the tickets voided in time out of the system so that no one can travel on them, the next best thing we can do is try to get find a law enforcement agency that will meet the passenger and conduct an interview. Um, Sometimes we'll get some good intelligence out of them as to, who did they pay for that ticket? Where, how, what kind of discount did they get? How do they know about this person? And we try to build up cases, as Sandy mentioned in the beginning, in the intro. We work on a daily basis with law enforcement to go after these various fraudsters. So that's sort of the philosophy we have here. We like to think we're really proactive and aggressive in this area. And to put the philosophy into action, we need to concentrate where we can on the serial offenders. And as I mentioned, a lot of these fraudsters are operating overseas. They're in places, Lagos, Nigeria, and Accra, Ghana, Johannesburg, South Africa, which probably does not surprise a lot of people that we have a lot of fraud emanating from those areas. In South and Central America, it's places like Lima, Peru, and Bogota, Colombia, Santo Domingo are real hot spots with a lot of activity. In the past, probably 6 or 7 months, we've seen a spike in activity in Indonesia, of all places, whereby people are purchasing tickets through U.S. travel agencies for travel just within Indonesia. So they seem to be island hopping, and they're not traveling outside of Indonesia, but they're just traveling within Indonesia. So that's come on our radar within the last 6 or 7 months. And another major problem we're having right now is Russia. We are having a serious issue. Russians traveling not only within Russia or within the old Soviet system to the various former Soviet republics, but also Russians traveling overseas, especially to places in China and Thailand, Kuala Lumpur. They're also traveling a lot into Europe as well. So we're trying to get our arms around what is going on, why all of a sudden, I would say in the last 3 months, we're seeing a big spike in this Russia fraud. And last but not least, we also have our own fraudsters operating here in the U.S. And in effect, all of these people, whether they're in West Africa or Russia, South America, they're in effect operating as black market travel agents. They're undercutting everybody's fares. They're taking business away from everybody because these people want to travel, but of course, if they think they've got a really good deal or they don't want to ask too many questions, they're going to take the gamble and deal with some of these black market travel agents. But one of the issues we have domestically is that the tickets are not easy to spot, whereas in some of these other places, Lagos and Accra, there are a lot of tickets that are issued for immediate departure. So say a ticket was issued yesterday and the passenger's traveling today. We do see a lot of legitimate people doing that going into, say, West Africa. We see a lot of certain industries and government organizations do a lot of last-minute ticketing. Industries like the oil industry, we see a lot of passengers moving, from places in Texas and Louisiana, traveling into places like Lagos, and it makes sense. that we can tie them back to an oil operation. A lot of government workers, government people traveling into these places with last minute travel. But in the U.S., it's very different, where so many people legitimately are buying yesterday and traveling today. Just the sheer volume of it makes it very difficult for anyone to spotlight fraudulent tickets. But we do try to track passengers who have traveled 2, 3, 4 times on some of these tickets, and we look on a daily basis to see if they have any new tickets, and if they do have new tickets, can we determine whether they're legitimately purchased, or are they once again traveling on a ticket purchased with a bad credit card. So we're using all of this information. We are contacting agencies, finding out more customer information when it's really, I probably shouldn't say customer information, it's fraudster information. So we get things like the alias that they used at the travel agency, a telephone number, an email address. Oftentimes there'll be photoshopped passports and driver's licenses, and I'll have a few examples of this as we move forward. But we gather all of that information and then work with federal law enforcement, typically agencies such as the FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security, are agencies that we routinely deal with and try to get these fraudsters identified, arrested, and convicted. So that's sort of on the aggressive side of things, but in addition, we want to do things like this webinar. We want to educate staff and independent contractors on fraud prevention, and hopefully at the end you'll find that this hour was worthwhile, and you'll feel better armed to protect yourself from what these guys are doing. But at the end of the day, we just think that the best defense in fraud prevention is a good offense. Like I said, we like to think that we're pretty proactive, and we just want to make life difficult for these guys to operate. So some of the schemes, what they're doing a lot of times is social engineering. So it's basically another term for manipulating other people. And these guys are good at it. They have good stories. They have compelling stories. They have good reasons why they need to get tickets immediately. And at the end of the day, they're just they're manipulating an agent's own customer service skills. And some of the challenges that we face are, they like to pose as doctors. We've been warning about this. I've been at this for over 20 years now. And I know back in the 90s, the fraudsters loved to pose as doctors for some reason, ministers and sometimes lawyers as well. Anyone that they think or they perceive has social standing. We've come across so many doctor/travel agents over time. It's not even funny. I don't know how many legitimately do that, but these fraudsters love to pose as doctors specifically, or ministers, in which they will claim that they've got missionaries that they need to travel immediately. And of course, who wouldn't want to help people who are willing to go to travel in and out of Africa and help others? So that's just their way of manipulating you, putting a little pressure on you to try to get what they want, which is that ticket, without you raising too many questions. And of course, for customer service skills, which everybody's trained in, we know you guys want to help. That's why you're there. And these guys are willing to prey upon your customer service skills. So in order to make you comfortable with dealing with them, especially if they're claiming to be a first-time customer, sometimes they'll claim that they were referred by somebody, but they're just making that up. Or they'll say, they'll give a very generic name, which, Joseph Williams or, Mary Smith type of thing. Mary referred you to the agency. Very generic names like that. So that when they target a travel agency in a specific area, they're going to make that first, what we call the straw purchase. It's never meant to be flown. It's simply meant to establish a relationship between the customer and a specific travel agent, and make them comfortable. So if he knows that he's going to target travel agencies in the Dallas area, then he's going to have that first straw purchase, say a ticket 2 weeks out, Dallas to New York. No red flags. You get an approval code through your system. It's a run-of-the-mill average type of ticket. No one's going to travel on that, but as soon as he believes that he's now got the travel agent on the hook, it's the next requests that are for the real passengers. So now he's going to make a request for, Lagos to London, departure in 24 hours, 48 hours, something like that. And he's going to have an excuse as to why he needs that ticket. But these are the real passengers. They're the people that have paid him or her. We do have a few of the fraudsters identified as female, but most of them are guys, sitting in cyber cafes often and just contacting agents day after day, hour after hour. Another ruse that they'll use is they'll claim to be one of a corporate client, or if you've got a client that is a university or a college. These guys do the research online. They'll go to a corporation website, find out who are some of the big wigs in the corporation. So now they'll try to pass themselves off through an email exchange, and I'll show you an example of or a couple of examples of that. But they love to do their research. They'll call up a corporation, and they'll find out who does your ticketing, and that's how they will often get referred or back to the agency, or they'll pose as someone at the corporate client and try to dupe somebody to do ticketing for them. So these guys are sneaky. They do their research, and it is definitely a big challenge when they're posing as your legit customers. So on to I like to call this one fun with Photoshop. These guys are adept at taking one image and matching up their compromised credit card information with photoshopped either a passport or a driver's license. So the fraudster will have probably purchased, in this example, we can see the passport image before it's been photoshopped, and this is the image on the right is after it's been photoshopped. This is the information that is copied and layered on top of the image to the left. And so the fraudster, he's got cardholder information from a real cardholder, an Alfonso Barron. We find that probably a lot of these fraudsters are buying their credit card information, the compromised credit cards, from the underground internet. So now that they buy them at lots of 50, 100, 1,000 at a time, he has to match. He's got to make documentation look as though it matches up with a true cardholder somewhere. But this is what they do. Some of the fraudsters are better at it than others, and this one's pretty sloppy. What we try to get people to look at is, so the image on the right with all of the information on it. If you really look at it, and if you get one of these emailed into your agency, just click on the link, click on the image, and you can expand it up, and you can start to see that, why is part of this document, really clear, and some of the spelling is very clear, and yet other parts are very fuzzy or much less clear. these images, everything should be very clear or everything should be very fuzzy. You should not come across an image where parts of it are fuzzy and parts are very clear. That's a very good indication that something's not quite right with this document. So here's another example. What we try to tell people, look for mistakes. Oftentimes English is not the first language for a lot of these people, and they'll make mistakes or they don't realize, such as this example in which we know that a passport is valid for 10 years minus one date from the date of issue. So this expiration date really should be June 18, 2009. Or 2019, not 10 years plus almost another 2 months. That's a definite issue. Plus, also look at the picture itself, how the person their body is angled away from the camera. So this is something you would see off some corporate website, or these guys just go on and they copy and paste it right off the internet. They don't care who it is, but this would never be accepted by as a valid passport photo. His body and his face would have to be straight onto the camera. They would quickly reject this and make the passport applicant go back and get another photo that's appropriate. But these are things that we know, and these guys get lax. They just want to do everything quick, do everything easy, and hope that they can get away with their shoddy Photoshop skills. We actually had an incident in January in which, if some of you may know the name Harry Houdini, who's been dead for about 85 years. He's the former contortionist and escape artist Harry Houdini, but a fraudster. We think he did this just to have some fun, but he took and copied a picture of Harry Houdini from, we figure it was taken about somewhere between 1900 and 1910, and he photoshopped that into a passport. So we think he was just being, that was his little joke. But unfortunately, the agent really never looked at the passport photo and started issuing tickets. So our suggestion is, if you're going to get this type of information, we really do recommend it. Get an image of their passport or driver's license. Get an image emailed to you of the front and back of the credit card, because even though that documentation is not going to protect you from a chargeback, it is more information that you have about the potential customer, and that you can spot anomalies, spot things that just aren't right. So it's still definitely worthwhile to get that stuff. And speaking of, so these are a couple of images of a back of a card. One of the things that we find is that fraudsters, as I said earlier, they've got to do a lot of this in order to keep their schemes going, and they get sloppy. They want to do things quick, and oftentimes we can spot the errors that are occurring on the back or front of a credit card. But here, just a quick review of that, of those images. We're missing where it says, full user name. This should really have, the bank's name that issued the card, not something generic like that. Another misspelling, or another one in which full username. It's very likely that the same fraudster is responsible for this sloppy use of images. Sometimes they're misspelling words or missing words. In this instance, we're missing an S in agrees. So by using this card, the holder agrees to all terms. So they're missing that. Up above the word, instead of with, or under which it was issued. So it's just a WHIT, obviously not a valid word. Further, the one below, visit is missing the T. Here's another one, visit with double S's. So, you know, if you're going to be getting this type of information from a potential new customer, look at it. Don't just accept it in and not review it, because this could be the key that tells you, hey, I'm not going to deal with this person. Something's wrong with the documentation that they're sending it in. So in order to further the scheme, sometimes if they pose as maybe a potential new corporate client, they'll go in and create a website, a bogus website. So in this instance, we had a fraudster. We believe he's operating out of Colombia, but he claimed to own a construction company in Cincinnati. So he's got on here, we can see a telephone number, but a quick look of whitepages.com and the reverse phone section, it's really a bandwidth VoIP. So if you remember anything today, remember what VoIP, voice over internet protocol. So the key is internet. The fact that this is an internet phone number doesn't make it bad on its own. We know, millions of people legitimately have VoIP telephone numbers, but it's just the key is that you really don't know where this person is. They could be anywhere in the world with an internet connection. So immediately you have no idea where this person really could be. You can stay on whitepages.com and then do a reverse address as well for that address at 113 West 4th Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, or Google Maps, MapQuest, and you can do a street view. That address in Cincinnati is really an old office building, and there's a big sign or at least a little bit ago, a year or so ago, it had a big furrier company was there. Definitely not a construction company. And then if the fraudster sends you to this site, then if you tried to click on any of the links along the left-hand side, models, scales, projects, constructions, those things, on a legitimate website, they should be taking you to, further or deeper into the site. But these links go nowhere at all. So, he spent a little bit of time putting this together just to try to make himself look legitimate, but at the end of the day, it's just, we call it a shell of a website. It's just the page and not much more. But what I like to include about this one is the writing at the bottom, the couple of paragraphs of information under the welcome about the alleged founder, Brian Kyle. So it's just a pretty generic name. But what's interesting about here is the manipulation that these guys do, the social engineering. So he's talking about all the great work he does with the Diocese of Pereira, Colombia. So it's a city of about 1 million people in Colombia. I had actually never heard of it until dealing with this incident. But this is a great way for the fraudsters to sort of pull at the heartstrings of the agent to say, hey, I'm doing all this good work, all this charity work with the Diocese of Pereira, Colombia, and who wouldn't want to help someone who's reaching out and trying to help others? But it really is used to explain away when he starts ordering tickets for travelers coming in and out of Pereira, Colombia, to other parts, either within Colombia or other parts of South and Central America. So there is a method to the madness. He's doing this for a reason, and this is the lengths that they'll go to in order to further their scheme. But what we can do is also look at some of these guys. This is an example of a fraud. Just 2 weeks ago we caught this, And what was interesting here was we saw some odd ticketing, and one of the analysts here called the travel agent in Georgia who issued the ticket, and they said, "Oh yeah, this ticket, it's fine. There were two tickets from Bogota to Madrid for immediate departure." We said, something's not right here, and they said, "Oh no, our corporate client is it's a big organization, or it's a big company called AES, which is which is an energy company, and they did have um, a, a location down in Puerto Rico, and that's the corporate client of this Georgia travel. They fulfilled the ticketing for them, but they have an address, a legitimate address of aespuertorico.com, and that's all legitimate. We were able to find that everything was fine with that. But the fraudster had obviously done his homework. He did his research, and he claimed he was with the same company, but in their new Philippines office. And he was referred from someone at the Puerto Rico office he was posing as an employee, and got them to introduce him, the fraudster, into the Georgia agent. And once we found out the name he was using and this email address, or this web address, we were able to go on to a site called Who Is. So it's another free website. So I know everyone loves free, but and I'll have all of these website addresses at the end. But whois.com, and you can input the web address to find out when it was created. So we were dealing with this travel agent on May 4th, and after looking at this information, we were able to determine that the creation date was the day before, and that same day the fraudster was able to get that Georgia agent to start issuing tickets for them. So we were able to luckily stop the fraud, or spot it early, get it stopped before it got out of control. Because when our fraud analyst talked to the agent, they were absolutely 100% sure that they were dealing with their legitimate corporate client. They were very, very unconcerned about it until we pointed this out and said, this is all bad, and they were able to stop doing any more ticketing for what they thought was a legit corporate client. So I know not everyone may see these types of schemes if you're doing, home-based and you're doing more leisure travel, but I know people dabble in both areas, and we just want to let you know and show you some of the lengths that these guys will go to in order to further their scheme. So here's once again another example of a corporate booking scheme. Once again, the fraudster found out what the true corporate client looked like. This was for a Mexican corporation that had offices in international offices. So he contacted them, found out which travel agency in the U.S. did ticketing for them, and he created an email domain by taking their real corporate address and adding a hyphen AU. And when he was questioned about it, he said, "Oh, I'm opening up the new Australia office." And just within a few days, the agency started doing ticketing for them. But once again, you can see the free site whois.com. Now, that site will definitely not work for, you can't search Yahoo and Gmail and Outlook, any of the free email services. It's only for other types of email domains that you can do a quick search. And once again, nice and free. Anybody can do it and determine, how long ago was that created. If the email domain was just created, you might want to be concerned. You might want to do a little research as to, especially if they're an existing client, and if they've been a client of yours for 5 years, and yet now they've changed up their email address, you might want to find out why that is before you're doing any ticketing for them. So this is the sneaky little things that they'll do. Like I said, in this, it's the -AU. Sometimes they'll add a single letter or a single number to it, and it looks 99% like the legit email address, but it's not quite the same. So you just got to really be careful about who you're dealing with. If you're just communicating back and forth via email, those email addresses are important, and they have to be 100% exactly what you're expecting. So this was I just want to show an example of the research that these guys will do. We dealt with this right over the Christmas break. We saw some ticketing out of a Miami agent who normally doesn't do any ticketing out of Africa, out of West Africa, but the day on Christmas Eve day, they got a request for 3 tickets out of Lagos, Nigeria to Toronto, and they issued them. We contacted the agency to find out what's going on, and they said, "Oh, this is our corporate client, and everything's fine." But when we started doing a little more digging and research, we found out that the fraudster had found a real person off of a corporate website, and they were in the you can see from the light blue balloons that this international company has offices all over the place. Europe, they have them in the U.S. as well. South America, legitimately, this is where they are. But the amount of information that a fraudster can glean from doing research on these corporate sites is impressive. So he found someone, he got their name, title, telephone number, and what their email address looked like. And then he went out and created one that was very similar to that, and contacted their travel management company and posed as a legitimate customer or a legitimate existing customer. But I like to show this one because it just shows how a little bit of research by these fraudsters, they can get a lot of information, a lot of seemingly legitimate looking information, and then they spin it, they twist it for their own uses. And this is another type we call the EDU scheme. So probably everyone is, or most everyone's aware, anybody with a college student or anyone working for a university, they have an email address ending .edu. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the fraudsters love to go on college and university websites. Lots of good information, just like the corporate websites, and they will pose as somebody from a legitimate university or college. So this was an example we dealt with last year. The fraudster went on to the University of North Georgia website. He found out somebody, their name and what they did, and their telephone number and their email, and he created. I like to show this one because just the title of the person alone sounds exhausting. They're the manager of accounts payable, finance, and business VP office / travel arranger. So I don't know about you, but that makes me tired just thinking about all the things that this person would have to do if they were if that was their legitimate title. But he's communicating, if you'll notice at the top, he's not coming from a .edu address. It's coming from an Outlook, so a free email address. So we really don't know where this person's coming from, even though down below we can see in the signature box there is an what would appear to be the legit email address for this person at ung.edu. So we recommend, as a best practice, if you're dealing with corporate clients or anyone with the university, communicate back and forth from a .edu account. and not, we know everyone is doing a lot of multitasking and you're doing a million things at the same time. It's very easy to just hit reply to this type of inquiry, and before you know it, you're communicating back and forth with that or using that Outlook.com. But we've asked agents or recommended to, even if the request comes in through a Yahoo, a Gmail, an Outlook type of free email service, take the extra little bit of time and communicate back out using the .edu. It will save a lot of financial heartache down the line. So in this instance, the travel agent, they did have this policy of communicating back with the .edu. The real person communicated back with the travel agent saying, hey, I am not requesting this at all. Please don't deal with this person. So it gives your real clients, whether corporate or university, an opportunity to know what's going on and get back to you to say, hey, I did not submit this request. And then, of course, at the bottom, we've got the, once again, another VoIP telephone number. As I put in here, a quick look of whitepages.com and reverse phone will identify this as bandwidth VoIP. So plenty of clues here that something's not on the up and up. I won't spend too much time on this. I'm not sure how many people really use corporate booking tools, but the fraudsters love to get in these as well. They love to create a lot of havoc using these tools, because if you think about it, once they get into a corporate booking tool, if there's not a lot of restrictions around what they're doing, these guys can go crazy. We've seen them manipulate these types of things, and it's one of the scary things is the fact that your agency, you could be doing everything right. You've got your security down, everyone's trained up on fraud prevention, but it could be an employee at the corporation whose credentials are compromised. And once you get into the corporate email or the corporate website, oftentimes there's no other password once they find the corporate booking tool. And so these guys can go in and in a very short amount of time, they can issue dozens of tickets in the middle of the night without anyone knowing what's going on. So one of the things we like to say is talk with your corporate clients about, if they know that they're legitimately only traveling within North America, cut off, restrict anyone's ability to input, say, ticketing for Lagos or Accra, Bogota, places like that, Moscow. So knowing where the corporate clients are legitimately traveling into and out of, and restricting the rest would be a great way to reduce exposure. Either do not display or remove auto ticketing on if your client does have legitimate travel in and out of some of these higher risk agency or areas. Allow the corporate client to book, but not the ability to auto ticket, so that somebody at the agency can gets an opportunity to review it and confirm if it's good or bad. Definitely turn off the guest booking feature. That guest booking feature allows the fraudster, once he's inside the system, to repeatedly go and create new booking profiles for all the passengers that he wants to get through. And then just monitor client bookings. After a while, it's not too difficult to discern where the clients typically are flying in and out of. If there's anything unusual, might want to raise a red flag, contact the corporate client saying, hey, this one or these tickets are outside the norm of what we normally see. Establish a policy about communicating with confirmed business emails. Once again, a request might come back in from a Yahoo, a Gmail account, those types of free services, but communicate only back out to the corporate or the EDU client address. Then we've also had a weird incident last year in which a very large agency contacted us and said, hey, we had what we thought was a corporate client, and they should have been using the corporate booking tool, but instead they kept calling in. So sometimes the reverse could be an indicator that something's not quite right when the same person is constantly calling and asking for tickets over the phone or emailing when in fact they should be using the booking tool. That might be a red flag that something's wrong. So to kind of sum up a lot of what we're talking about, these are some of the free internet tools, and I'm here at ARC as well. We love free as well, but it's the more information you can get about a potential customer, and I know, everyone wants to grow their business, but you want to be careful about it as well. You want to trust people that they are who they say they are, but you also need to verify. So the more information you can get about them, the more you can go onto some of these websites and see if all of it is verifiable. But one of the pages we like to use are the sites, whitepages.com, reverse phone. If you see the indicators that VoIP, voice over internet protocol, you have no idea where that person is. Some of the vendors that supply these VoIP telephone numbers is one called WiMAX Communication, and you may recognize that their product is Magic Jack, and that has been advertised for the last 20 years, and that's what Magic Jack is. It's a voice over internet connection. Others that are recognizable, Google Voice, Skype. Other vendors are level3.com, bandwidth.com, Pinger are other vendors and that offer this type of service. At the end of the day, you just want to know, is your new client, are they in Akron or are they in Accra? And that's a big difference between the two about the level of or the potential for fraud. You want to look at Google Maps. If the customer is giving you an address, is it a house, a hotel, a hospital? Is it an empty field? Does it seem reasonable? And or is it a something like a UPS store or a FedEx store location? So another neat one is a website called binlist.net. And in fact, I just used it this morning with an agent up in New York. They had these credit card images sent to them, and from the bin list you can look. And bin is for bank identification number. So the first 6 digits of any credit card, debit card is going to tell you which bank it belongs to, or which bank issued the card. So if you take the first 6 digits from any card number, other than Amex, Amex is always going to be 37 something. But any of the others, you can put in the first 6 digits and find out who issued the card. And what was neat was the travel agent received the front and back of images of the front and back of a card that claimed to be from U.S. Bank, but the credit card number, that BIN number, that bank identification number, was really a Chase account. So sometimes these guys, they're not going to spend the time and locate an image of a Chase credit card. If they've got a U.S. Bank, they're simply going to Photoshop that account number onto the top of an image of a U.S. Bank or any other number. So it's just more information that we can use against these guys. So that was neat. I just walked an agent through this process earlier today, and uh, they were very appreciative of that. But we talked about earlier about whois.com, and if it's an email domain, you want to know how long ago was it created. If this company's been your client for the last 5 years, and yet now you're getting new emails claiming to be from that client, but there's something not quite the same about the email address. You might want to go onto whois.com, find out how long ago it was created. And as I mentioned earlier, it does not work for the free email services, Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo. In Russia, some of the Russian fraudsters will use a service called Yandex, Yandex. It's just another free service. And I love this last one, is whocallsme.com. So is anybody else complaining about receiving phone calls from a certain number? And this is where I know some agents will go and post saying, hey, somebody called me from this telephone number. They were using this email address, and I got a bad feeling, and I'm not going to deal with them, or it was fraud. I don't trust the person, and this is a way of getting a telephone number out there so that it's immediately searchable on the internet. So whocallsme.com is another free place to go. So that is the end of the formal presentation. We really want to thank everybody, but I think we'll open it up for questions. And one thing what I do request is we know agents are bombarded all the time in your inbox. You get these emails, we call them an email solicitation. But typically most people just delete them and move on. But if you could forward them to our fraud department, and the email address for that is FIFP at arccorp.com. So Frank India, Frank Peter at arccorp.com, because it allows us to track the fraudster aliases, and especially if they have passenger names and credit card numbers and things like that, we really do look at each and every one. You can always call us toll free, 855-358-0393, and talk to one of the fraud analysts. We also have a fraud website. It's open. Anyone can go on. At the bottom, you can just Google ARC fraud prevention and get to that page. We're always trying to improve it, put out fraud alerts, put out schemes out there as well. But now I think Sandy will open it up, and hopefully we have some questions.
Okay, thank you so much. That is such incredibly valuable information. It just boggles the mind with the ways the fraudsters come up with to get things out of the travel industry that they shouldn't be doing. We do have a couple of questions, and you've answered a lot of them already. We also had several people writing in their own experiences with getting fraudulent requests. So you'll see those when you get a list of all these questions. You mentioned forwarding the emails to the FIFP address, FIFP at arccorp.com, which I do a lot now since our last one. If somebody comes across, for example, a fraudulent credit card, other than not issuing tickets against it, what should their next step be?
Yeah, they can. We love to get those in because what'll happen is, the fraudster, if your agency is not going to do ticketing because you recognize it as fraud, he's going to move on to another agent, and he might use that same card, that same day through an agency, the next day, the next week. So it allows us to monitor for any new usage of that credit card, and then what'll happen is then we will warn the next agent down the line to say, hey, we think you're dealing with a fraudster. Hopefully they can still avoid the ticket and avoid any losses. And we do the same thing with the passenger names. As agents send them in these email solicitations, and we monitor those names for the next couple of weeks looking for any new ticketing, and just try to warn everybody down the line, hey, stop, you're not dealing with who you think you are.
Right. One of our agents wants to know your opinion about what do you think is the best way to approach a client if you can't quite tell if they're legitimate or fraudulent? What are the key
Um,
questions to ask?
yeah, a lot of agents will, if they're just dealing over the phone or a combination phone and email, and they've never met them, um, especially if the person claims that they're local, just say, hey, this is great, but I can't issue any tickets until you come into the agency and I can see you. Uh, Oftentimes when agents do that, uh, especially if the customer's on the phone or the fraudster's on the phone, they just hang up because they know, um, they no one's going to show up. So
Right.
that's a good indicator that something's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. We have time for one more question. I want to tell our agents that if your question has not gotten asked, or if you think of something after the webinar, Doug has the information up there for getting in touch with ARC, and they will be happy to help you out and answer your questions. Our last question for today, Doug, is does ARC also work with Canadian authorities? What if it's a Canadian agency that suspects fraud? What's their recourse?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from them as well. In fact, I did some training up there just last month in Calgary and Edmonton. Flew up to meet with some of the agency groups. I believe I'll be in Montreal in July, early July, uh, to because we're trying to raise the awareness up in Canada as well. And I do work with law enforcement up there. I do have a criminal case in the Montreal area with the Quebec provincial police. So it was identified that two fraudsters were targeting agencies down in the U.S. It was very clear from everything that the fraudsters really were up in Canada, and I worked with the Secret Service here and built up the case, and we knew we had to turn it over to Canadian authorities, and it took a little while, but eventually the provincial police there agreed to open the case. So I'm hoping that's coming to a conclusion here this summer. But these cases take a while, but people do, get arrested. They do go to jail. Um, it just, you know, there's always seemingly somebody new who's willing to step into the void and pick up the fraud again. So it's a constant battle, but we figure through webinars like this, and we do in-person training at conferences and seminars, and just talk about fraud and sort of raise the profile that, hey, there's a lot of people out there committing a lot of bad stuff. You need to be careful.
It really reminds us that we have to be vigilant all the time about things that don't quite seem right. If you get a feeling that there may be something wrong with a request, look into it further. This has been so incredibly helpful. I really appreciate your being with us today. Our host today has been ARC, and our speaker has been Doug Nass, Manager of Fraud Investigations at ARC. Doug, thank you so much again for this wonderful information.
Thank you, everybody, for participating today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
Sounds great, and I want to thank all the agents also for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Bye, everybody.